I have to admit, this question kind of comes across as a little big brother. And I don't mean in terms of the question, but in terms of the technologies we're talking about. The thought of, as I'm walking through a space in a mall or in a grocery store, having a sign recognizing me in particular kind of creeps me out a little bit. But the implications for signage as a whole are pretty massive. Because if we really consider, digital signage is all about delivering targeted messaging, where I want to get a call to action into the right person at the right time to influence a particular behavior, whatever that behavior may be. Typically, it could be something like I want them to purchase my product or to pay attention to my brand, whatever that is. And using recognition and metrics is one of the hot topics we have going on in our industry right now, because when we look at like what Intel's doing with the AVA program, their AIM suite, Anonymous Video Analytics, where we're delivering metrics on who's viewing the signs, what part of the sign they're looking at, what content they're seeing. When we see all this, that's valuable because that helps us target. But when we start to go beyond that, where we're actually recognizing an individual, that's where I do see some real concerns raised about security and privacy. If you really think about it, we've had a lot of our interactions, our purchasing habits, these things have been tracked. I mean, almost all of us have at least one loyalty card from a grocery store chain or something like the Best Buy Rewards program, right? And these things are all used just to track our purchasing habits so they can target advertising. And this is done on an actual individual basis, and many of us don't think anything of it. Our smartphones, tablets, things like that, when I logged in for this particular video, it asked me to share my location. And many of us do that, and we don't even think about the fact that it is tracking our individual information. So while a lot of this stuff can be opted out of, and we're kind of comfortable with a lot of these things today, the idea of a sign that's in a space that I don't really have any direct control over, knowing exactly who I am and where I'm going, I can see that would make people uncomfortable. That's why there's been a lot of concern with things like Apple's iBeacon, which is a really, really impressive technology, but it does allow for a lot of personalized tracking. And I think what we're going to see now that people are starting to understand, wait a minute, I mean, there's even the potential for facial recognition being baked into these softwares so that it's not even an opt-in thing. It just happens to recognize me as a person when I walk into a space. And there's some debate on places like Costco where it's a membership club where you opt in to just be a member, and they're perfectly fine doing that if they bake that in to the membership contract and all that. But I think there's still a lot of gray area here. I think there's going to be a lot of legislation we're going to see take place over the next few years in order to kind of dictate what's fair, what's not, what's reasonable, and what's not. And there's been a lot of discussion lately over the concept of privacy in public. And I think this is just an extension of that. How much privacy do you have when you go out into a public space like a shopping mall, a retail outlet, a restaurant, a stadium? I mean, how much privacy are you truly entitled to when you're just walking around in public? So there's a lot of questions here. There's no doubt that the information can be incredibly useful to digital signage, particularly signage that's targeted towards advertising and selling. But whether or not that individual personal tracking is going to make sense, well, I think there's going to be a lot of questions still up in the air about it. Like I said, we're in a litigious society today. I think there's going to be a lot of lawsuits and debate and this law and that law before we get to where we need to go.